Picture this. It's Wednesday, June 10th, 2026, right in South Boston.
Okay.
You have a 12-year-old boy named David Byrne and his 11-year-old sister.
Mm.
And they are doing what kids have literally done for generations. They're running a neighborhood lemonade stand.
Right on the corner of West 9th and East Street.
Exactly. It's the quintessential picture of American childhood innocence. The sun is out, the cash box is on the table. But then two suspects approach the stand.
And they do not look like typical customers.
No, not at all. They pace back and forth on the sidewalk for a moment, just like sizing up the situation. Then they casually ask the kids if they take Apple Pay or Venmo.
Which is such a wild modern detail.
It really is. And before David or his sister can even process that digital age question, one of the suspects reaches out, grabs their cash box, and then casually lifts his shirt to flash a black firearm tucked right into his waistband.
Oh, God.
But, well, here is the most jarring detail of this entire scene. The masked suspects holding up this lemonade stand are basically the exact same age as the victims. Yeah. Police estimate one suspect is around 14 years old, and the other is just 11.
An 11-year-old. That's just hard to wrap your head around.
Now, before we really plunge into the depths of this story, just a quick favor to ask you. Please take a second to like, subscribe, follow, and turn on notifications for the show.
And we also have a really quick housekeeping item regarding the ongoing Martin Stevens versus OpenAI situation.
Oh, right. The update on that.
Yeah, so to be completely clear here, this is still not a formal lawsuit. However, Martin Stevens has officially suspended his voluntary quiet period.
Which was that informal agreement he made to temporarily not speak publicly about the dispute, right?
Exactly. And this escalation happened after OpenAI filed its confidential S-1 on June 8, 2026.
And for context for you listening, an S-1 is basically the foundational registration document a company has to file with the SEC before going public.
Right, and they filed this without first engaging with Stevens at all?
Wow, really?
Yeah. He views this action as a sign of extreme disrespect. He stated he will not re-enter any quiet period unless it is formally, legally agreed upon. Currently, no negotiations are public.
Got it. What about the security side of things?
Importantly, for those following that aspect, the Deadman's Switch, that automated security system set to release sensitive files if Stevens is incapacitated, that has not been activated.
Okay, meaning Stevens is physically and legally safe.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so stepping back from the corporate tech world, let's return immediately to the streets of South Boston.
Right.
The police arrive. The suspects are eventually tracked down. The handcuffs click on the wrists of an 11-year-old and a 14-year-old. But what actually happens the next morning?
The big question.
Yeah, and that very question sent us digging into a massive statewide reality for you. Today's deep dive uses this chilling local incident to really explore what happens when the Massachusetts juvenile justice system encounters suspects who are literally in elementary or middle school.
It's a huge issue right now.
We are going to look at brand new data showing a sudden surge in juvenile pretrial detentions, the actual mechanics of how a child gets denied bail, and the state's aggressive push for diversion alternatives.
Because you are looking at a profound collision of two entirely different worlds here.
Right.
You have the immediate visceral reality of a neighborhood that has just experienced an armed robbery involving children on both sides of the gun.
Yeah.
And then you have the vast bureaucratic machinery of the state's justice system trying to figure out what on earth to do with an 11-year-old who allegedly committed a serious felony.
Well, the details of the robbery itself are just staggering, and they highlight that collision perfectly. Yeah. The victim's mother, Jennifer Byrne, told reporters that her kids set up these lemonade stands all the time.
It's a neighborhood staple.
Exactly. And it's always gone great. The dad, Dave Byrne, expressed this absolute raw outrage. He called the incident tragic, sickening, and grotesque.
I mean, you can't blame him.
Not at all. He pointed out the obvious. They live in a strong, safe community, and you simply cannot have kids getting robbed at gunpoint over a few dollars of lemonade money.
Yeah, and when you actually watch the surveillance video that the Boston police released, it's chilling. The suspects are wearing what is known locally as Nike shistis.
Oh, the ski masks.
Right. It's slang for full-face coverings or balaclavas that leave only the eyes exposed. One suspect is in all black with a white mask. The other is carrying a backpack.
They just stroll up and use everyday tech lingo, asking about Venmo before revealing a deadly weapon.
That casual nature is precisely what makes the footage so unsettling. It is a highly adult, highly dangerous crime. An armed robbery executed by children who are utilizing the everyday language of kids today.
They literally told the young victims they had no physical money, right?
Yes. They asked if their mother could Venmo them instead. And when the victims were confused, they just decided to take the cash box by force and flash a gun to ensure compliance.
I spent some time looking at the public reaction to this online, and it is a fascinating mix of complete disbelief, shock, and, well, debate.
I bet.
Yeah, if you look at the local Boston Reddit threads discussing the surveillance footage, people are just stunned. You have commenters asking the fundamental question like, who the hell robs kids?
Right.
Another user pointed out how small the suspects look on camera, noting that the kid in black is tiny and has to be younger than 13.
Which we know he is. He's 11.
Exactly. Some people initially made dark jokes about it being a rival lemonade stand moving in on their turf, but the tone shifted really quickly when the reality of the gun set in.
Of course.
One user argued that society needs to stop normalizing these full-face coverings because criminals are using a teenage fashion trend to blend in and commit felonies.
But there's another side to that online debate, right?
Yeah, another user jumped in and pushed back, reminding everyone that as crazy as this entire situation is, these suspects are still, biologically and legally, children.
It's such a complex reality.
It really is like a corrupted Norman Rockwell painting. You have the quintessential American summer scene, completely shattered by the introduction of a firearm.
But the community of South Boston, they refuse to let that corrupted picture become their new normal.
Yeah, the response was amazing.
It is incredibly telling how a neighborhood responds to trauma. They did not retreat indoors. Family friends of the Burns, Nicole and Jonathan Raucall, mobilized almost immediately.
I love this part.
They organized an event called the Lower End Lemonade Sale for that very Friday at 5:30 p.m., and they set it up right at the exact same corner of West 9th and E Streets.
They literally reclaimed the corner. They went right back to the scene of the crime.
They did. Jonathan Raucall stated publicly that they wanted the neighborhood kids to know that a single terrifying incident isn't going to stop them from playing on their own street or hanging out with their friends.
It was a massive show of defiant optimism.
Yes, but it went beyond just moral support. They tied the community healing directly to the root cause of the neighborhood's trauma. Half of all the money raised at that massive Friday lemonade stand was pledged directly to a local gun violence prevention group.
Wow. So you see the community rallying. They can heal the emotional wounds. They can buy out a lemonade stand, support the victims, and donate to a great charity.
Right.
But the legal system still has to deal with the perpetrators. Society demands safety, and you cannot have armed robberies on a neighborhood corner.
No, you can't.
But we are also talking about a suspect who might still be in the 5th grade. So if an 11-year-old with a gun is caught, where do they physically go? That leads us straight into this eye-opening data coming out of the state.
And when you dive into the newly released fiscal year 24 data from the Massachusetts Juvenile Justice Policy and Data Board, the JJPAD board, you see something bizarre happening.
Okay, what do you mean by bizarre?
Well, the system is in total flux. The front door of the juvenile system is not actually getting more crowded. The overall use of the system has essentially plateaued. Okay.
Yet, the holding cells in the back are filling up significantly faster than before. The use of physical custody is sharply increasing.
Okay, let's unpack this. The whole premise of the juvenile court system is supposed to be rehabilitation, right?
Ideally.
So if overall youth crime has basically plateaued, how are we locking significantly more kids up before they even go to trial? That math doesn't make sense to me.
The contrast is stark when you look at the percentages. Between fiscal year 23 and fiscal year 24, the number of pretrial detention admissions jumped by 17%.
17%, that's a huge jump for just 1 year.
It is. And pretrial detention means these are youths locked in a facility before a judge or jury has found them guilty of anything. Now, overall arrests only increased by 7%.
Okay, so the arrests are only up slightly, but the detentions are spiking.
Exactly. Let's translate these percentages into a relatable visualization. Picture 100 kids standing in front of a juvenile court judge for the very first time at their initial arraignment.
Okay, 100 kids. According to the new data, 14 of those 100 kids are not going home today. They're being ordered into state custody.
Wow.
And of those 14 kids who are detained, almost all of them, 85%, are facing a felony charge.
So these aren't minor infractions.
No, and about 3 of those 14 kids were standing there specifically for a weapons offense.
Right. So the data explicitly notes that the slight 7% increase in overall arrests is largely being driven by a 13% increase in lower-level offenses.
Right.
But those aren't the kids getting locked up. The kids going into physical custody are the ones bringing guns to lemonade stands.
That is the critical tension here. The kids who are actually being detained are facing very serious violent allegations.
Yeah.
And the mechanism for how a child gets locked up in Massachusetts is incredibly specific. It happens primarily through a legal process called a 58A hearing, which is colloquially known in the courthouses as a dangerousness hearing.
Walk us through how that actually works, because I imagine a judge doesn't just casually decide to lock an 11-year-old in a cell.
No, definitely not. The process is initiated by the prosecutor. If a prosecutor looks at a case file, say, a 14-year-old and an 11-year-old flashing a firearm over a cash box, that prosecutor can file a formal motion for a 58A hearing.
So they have to officially request it.
Yes. They are essentially telling the judge, this youth presents a fundamental threat to public safety. No amount of parental supervision, no strict curfew, and no GPS tracking bracelet is going to keep this community safe if they are allowed to walk out of this courthouse today.
So what does the judge do then?
The judge holds a mini-trial right there. They weigh the nature of the crime, the history of the youth, and the potential danger to the public.
Okay.
If the judge agrees with the prosecutor that the youth is simply too dangerous to release, they are ordered into a hardware-secure facility prior to their actual trial.
So just to clarify for the listener, when we say hardware-secure facility, we're talking about a traditional locked juvenile detention center. We are talking about concrete, locked doors, and guards. And you're probably thinking to yourself, well, if an 11-year-old points a gun at my kid, lock him up. Right, protect the neighborhood.
Which is a completely understandable reaction.
But the sources we are analyzing today spend a lot of time documenting the severe collateral damage of putting a child into that environment.
Yeah, the state's own reports cite extensive, peer-reviewed research outlining the dangers of juvenile detention.
What does that research say?
Well, when you take a brain that is still developing and place it in a highly restrictive, often traumatic environment, the outcomes are overwhelmingly negative.
It makes sense.
It completely disrupts their education. It severs whatever positive community ties they might have had. It causes elevated psychological distress.
Yeah.
And statistically, placing a youth in detention actually increases the likelihood that they will reoffend later in life.
It basically becomes a school for crime.
Essentially, yes. The state is fully aware that incarcerating youth creates a cycle of recidivism. They recognize that if a child is standing in a courtroom facing a dangerousness hearing, multiple societal safety nets have already failed them.
Which means we need a different approach.
Right. That is why Massachusetts is actively pouring resources into building off-ramps. They are desperately trying to expand alternatives to traditional prosecution.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because this brings us to the concept of diversion. But I want to be clear about what diversion actually means in this context, because the terminology can sound a bit soft.
It can, yeah.
Diversion isn't a free pass. It isn't a get-out-of-jail-free card where the judge just wags a finger and sends the kid home. Think of it as a mandatory detour.
I like that analogy.
You are pulling the kid off the high-speed paved highway that leads directly to state prison, and you are forcing them onto a dirt road of accountability. It is a much bumpier ride. They had to do a lot of hard work, but it keeps them from driving off a cliff.
That is an excellent way to conceptualize the Massachusetts Youth Diversion Program, or the MYDP.
Tell us more about that.
So this is a massive state-funded initiative launched by the Office of the Child Advocate in partnership with the Department of Youth Services.
Okay.
The core mission is to provide high-quality, evidence-based behavioral programming as a formal alternative to arresting youths or processing them through the traditional juvenile court system.
And looking at the data, the footprint of this program is expanding rapidly, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It started as a pilot in a few select counties back in 2022, but by 2025, it is going to be fully operational in Suffolk County, which is where Boston and our South Boston Lemonade Stand are located, as well as Norfolk County.
But what I find most revealing in the data is who is actually utilizing this detour.
The referral data for fiscal year 24 tells a fascinating story about how the legal system views itself.
Right. Let's look at those numbers.
Police departments across the state referred 27 kids to the diversion program. Clerk magistrates referred 31.
Okay, so a few dozen.
But the district attorneys, the prosecutors, referred 132 youths. And the judges were the biggest referrers by far, sending 153 kids out of the courtroom and into these diversion programs.
Think about what that means.
Yeah.
The judges, the people who are sitting on the bench, staring these kids in the face, looking at their actual physical size and hearing their stories, are the ones most desperate to find an alternative.
They see the reality firsthand.
Exactly. They see an 11-year-old suspect and realize that stamping them with a permanent criminal record is not going to fix the underlying issue. But how does this dirt road of accountability actually work?
Well, it varies.
The sources highlight restorative justice as a key component, which is a term that gets thrown around a lot. How does it practically change a kid's behavior?
Restorative justice shifts the focus entirely. In a traditional courtroom, the state is the victim.
Right, it's the Commonwealth versus the defendant.
Exactly. The prosecutor speaks for the state, the defense attorney speaks for the kid, and the kid just sits there silently. Restorative justice removes the lawyers from the center of the dialogue. It requires active mediation.
Which sounds intense.
It is. Imagine being 11 or 14 years old, and instead of sitting quietly in a holding cell, you are forced to sit across a table from the 12-year-old you just terrified with a firearm.
Wow, that's heavy.
A trained mediator facilitates a conversation where you have to look your victim in the eye. You have to hear from their own mouth how you gave them nightmares.
Yeah.
You have to understand the tangible, real-world harm your actions cause to another human being. For many youths, facing the human consequences of their actions is far more difficult and impactful than just doing time in a facility.
It strips away the tough guy facade, right?
Absolutely.
You can't hide behind a mask or a gun when you have to listen to a mother explain how you terrorized her children. But does this mandatory detour actually work? Or is it just a feel-good initiative?
The initial data is highly promising. In 2024, the consulting division at UMass Chan Medical School conducted a comprehensive, independent evaluation of the MYDP.
And what did they find?
They found very high levels of program fidelity. That means the programs are actually executing the evidence-based practices they are designed to do. They aren't just cutting corners.
That's crucial.
Yeah. They found high rates of satisfaction from the judges and prosecutors who referred the youths. But most importantly, the youth participants themselves reported high levels of satisfaction.
That's surprising.
The programs actually engage them. They address the root causes of the behavior, whether that is trauma, lack of impulse control, or peer pressure, rather than simply punishing the symptom.
That is the ideal outcome. But we have to look at the other side of the coin. Not every kid is granted diversion.
No, unfortunately not.
Some crimes are too severe, or a prosecutor refuses to drop the charges. What happens to the kids who stay in the traditional system but aren't held in physical detention? Because they don't just walk free.
Far from it. For youths who are arraigned but released back into the community, they almost always end up on pretrial monitoring or supervision.
Which is managed by the Massachusetts Probation Service.
Yes, and the data shows a massive shift in how the state handles these kids.
How so?
Well, while the overall number of youths starting a pretrial probation case held relatively steady at around 1,500 cases in FY24, the intensity of that state supervision has skyrocketed.
So same number of kids, but watched much closer.
Exactly. Since fiscal year 21, the number of cases in which a youth was monitored on specific, highly restrictive pretrial conditions of release has increased by a staggering 53%.
A 53% increase in strict conditions. Let's talk about what that actually looks like for a middle schooler.
It's a lot.
We are talking about slapping a bulky GPS ankle monitor on a 13-year-old. We're talking about court-mandated strict curfews where a probation officer can knock on their door at 8 p.m. to make sure they're in bed.
Right.
We're talking about mandatory, random drug testing, and forced cooperation with mental health or substance abuse treatments.
Yeah.
So even if the kids aren't sitting behind locked doors in a detention facility, the state's grip on their daily lives is tightening significantly.
It reflects a judicial system that is incredibly anxious about public safety. The courts are trying to strike an almost impossible balance.
It's a tightrope walk.
It really is. They read the data. They know they don't want to lock a 12-year-old in a cell because it will likely ruin their life. But they also cannot just send a child back home to their neighborhood unconditionally if that child was just caught roaming the streets with a stolen firearm.
Because the risk to the community is simply too high.
Right. So the compromise is heavy surveillance. They release the child, but they put them on a digital leash with strict conditions, hoping to monitor their every move until the trial date.
Which brings us all the way back to the corner of West 9th and East Streets in South Boston.
Yeah.
When you take all of this macro-level statewide data, the 17% spike in detentions, the 53% increase in strict probation conditions, the rapid expansion of the state diversion programs, and you apply it to the micro-level reality of David Byrne and his sister getting robbed over a cash box.
It's just heartbreaking.
It is, on every possible level.
The lemonade stand robbery is the exact collision point of these two massive societal forces.
How do you mean?
On one side, you have the absolute non-negotiable necessity of public safety. A community simply cannot function if 11 and 14-year-olds are walking around with firearms, wearing full-face masks, and terrorizing other children.
Well, of course not. The outrage from Dave and Jennifer Byrne is entirely justified. The community's fear is real.
Exactly. But on the other side, you have a juvenile justice framework that is desperately trying to divert these exact types of kids away from a lifetime of criminal behavior. The state knows that throwing an 11-year-old into a hardware-secure facility might just guarantee they become a career criminal, costing society millions of dollars and creating countless future victims down the line.
It is a staggering problem to try and solve. The state is caught entirely between your completely valid demand for safety on your own streets and the biological reality of a developing brain.
It's an incredibly difficult spot to be in.
And it leaves us with something really heavy for you to think about long after this deep dive ends. If a child's brain is still fundamentally developing and the justice system inherently acknowledges that they lack full adult culpability, at what point does the severity of a crime override the presumption of childhood innocence?
That's the real question.
Think about it. Where exactly do we draw the line between a child who just needs a dirt road diversion program to get back on track and a fundamental threat that requires a cage?
Yeah.
If you found this episode valuable, please like, subscribe, share, follow, and turn on notifications. It helps us continue bringing you content like this and ensures you never miss future releases.